We live in a society where we define by several things, all kinds of things, in fact. We're defined by our appearance, obviously. We're defined by our titles, our accomplishments, but mostly our actions. Those actions, whether they be admirable or courageous or questionable or unforgiving, will forever eternalize us in the eyes of society. Acts such as sexual abuse. With the topic of sexual abuse and sexual inappropriate behavior, I'm not telling you something that you don't already know, because all you have to do is turn on the television or log onto your social media to see, hear, and experience the widespread flood sweeping across this nation, as well as the effects it's had on people who've been affected by sexual abuse. But what about individuals who sexually offend? Are they worthy of being redefined? Are they deserving of being offered true, impactful rehabilitation programs? When speaking about sex offenders from this point on, I'm going to be focusing on youth ages 11 years old to 17 years old. Youth who we have continuously stoned with no lack of empathy. Youth who we continue to hammer nails of hate and not offer compassion. Youth who sexually offend in general in our community. Are they destined for a future of crucifixion, social crucifixion, or are they deserving of rehabilitation, creative innovation, rehabilitation? My name is Aurelio Villa Luna Diaz. I'm a singer, community development coordinator for Downtown Mansfield Incorporated, and I'm also a survivor of sexual abuse. So kids and adolescents who are sex offenders, what do we think about them? They're perverts. They're monsters. Who cares if they have a mental illness or developmental disability, if they in fact have one? Who cares what happened to them as a kid? Who cares? For a long, long time, I didn't care at all, but I'm glad that I do now. So I'm here to talk about the importance and the community support that is needed for a non-traditional program here in Mansfield, Ohio, geared solely for youth who sexually offend. A program whose building blocks include music, creative writing, mentorship. A program that will help youth who sexually offended to heal deep-rooted pains, traumas, and public shame and judgment, and embark on a path of accountability and change so they can successfully and safely be integrated back into their community and your community. This is about creative rehabilitation, not social crucifixion. So the effects of sexual abuse can trickle in all aspects of your life. I was sexually abused when I was 4 years old, when I was 7 years old, and when I was 14 years old. And the indescribable feelings of rage, embarrassment, unhappiness, and utter loneliness plagued me for a very long time. And it still does. As a teenager, I struggled with the aftershocks of sexual abuse by hating myself and coping in unhealthy ways. But fortunately, I discovered 3 things. I discovered music, I discovered poetry, and I discovered the joy of singing. And when you combine those things together, you create a song. Songs that were my form of expression for everything, including therapy. After high school, I moved to Columbus, where I had the privilege to work with a variety of men and women, boys and girls, who had an array of needs. It was through this experience that I slowly, very slowly, began to develop some sort of empathy for these humans, not their acts. The more I worked with these folks, through group efforts, one-on-one counseling, one-on-one therapies, reading in their case files, seeing what happened to them, and most importantly, meeting their families and getting an idea of what happened to them as a child was when I really began to develop empathy for these folks. In my work experience throughout the years in direct care, recreational therapy, and case management, I learned by working with youth with sex offenses that there are many pitfalls in this system. Usually, if you sexually offend, you're incarcerated in a juvenile detention center where rehabilitation is not a focal point, and you're at high risk of ridicule, not just from your peers who are incarcerated, but actually from the corrections officer and other staff. Depending on the sexual offense, the severity of it, you are then transferred from a juvenile detention center to a DYS, which is a Department of Youth Services of Juvenile Correctional Facility, which is basically a prison for youth. The amount of emotional, psychological, physical damage done to these kids who sexually offended is horrifying, and it's accepted, and no one says anything. We throw them away because we don't want them. So what about kids who sexually offend in our community? I've had a huge privilege this past year of talking with countless counselors, professionals in social services, and most importantly, members of our creative community, musicians, poets, dancers, about the need and the implementation of such a program that will help kids who sexually offended. This art mentorship program would work closely with many local organizations such as Job and Family Services, city schools, Catalyst, etc. To enable it's a program for kids that come to Monday through Friday after school, learning different types of art therapies with trained, passionate artists. But the key focal point here would be relationships. Mentorship for kids who probably never had a healthy or positive adult relationship in their life, or anyone to look up to, or continued experience crucial or cruel judgment from adults based on what they've done. Obviously, there are a lot of intricate details in a program of this nature to exist in Mansfield based on the topic. It's too taboo. But most importantly, for something like this to happen and be successful, it involves community support and empathy. And redefining, because we know defining is very easy to do. Redefining is the challenge. For 4 decades, I've struggled, and I continue struggling, redefining myself in all aspects of my life. But I stand up here very proudly now and proclaim how proud I am to the privilege to work with all the men and women and children and boys who've offended or hurt someone sexually. I'm proud to have worked with them and got to know that through their acts, they've had shattered hearts and shattered spirits and stories untold because no one wanted to hear it. Redefining through benevolence is the key here. This is more than an art mentorship program that's going to happen. It's about the community embrace, the forgiveness that can support it. Kids who are sons and daughters and grandchildren, nieces and nephews. What if it was your son or your daughter? Wouldn't you want some kind of program put in place? Wouldn't you want to shield them from the attacks of society and their peers or adults, professionals? I respectfully encourage you and challenge you to open your hearts, but mostly open your minds to the fact that everything happens for a reason, as cliche as that sounds. Put down your stones, put down your hammers. Quit crucifying kids who've sexually offended. Thank you very much.